Thank you for joining the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. A leading Democratic strategist and political commentator, Karen Finney was a senior advisor to Stacey Abrams' campaign for governor, the Democratic National Committee, and Karen Finney served as senior advisor for communications and political outreach and senior spokesperson for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. From her experience working in media, national politics, political and communication strategy in both the public and private sectors, Karen Finney brings a unique perspective to her work. She was a political analyst and hosted her own show on MSNBC, Disrupt with Karen Finney. Her experience includes work on 4 presidential campaigns, both the president and first lady during the Clinton administration, and she was the Democratic National Committee's first African-American spokeswoman, helping to lead the DNC's communication strategy for the 50-state strategy, successful 2006 congressional elections and 2008 presidential campaigns. Joining us this morning alongside the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., is Karen Finney. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Great to have you.
Great to be with you this
you on
morning.
mute, Dr. Chavis.
Yes, it's a special treat to have Karen Finney. She's done so many outstanding things, not only in the political sphere, but also just in terms of impact and making sure that the issues that affect the quality of life of African Americans and other communities of color in America are not only articulated, but well served. So Karen, on behalf of the Black press, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor.
Absolutely. And we're going to jump right into it, but we would be remiss, Karen, if we didn't ask you how you were doing, your well-publicized battle after brain surgery. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. And, you know, this is a place where, as you all know, our community, our friends, our loved ones are so important. And my community has just been with me the whole way, supporting me. So thank you. And I count you all as part of that. So thank you so much for asking.
Well, absolutely. And so we know that we are only a couple of weeks basically away from the all important 2022 midterm elections. Dr. Chavis, the Black press, he's leading the Black press, the Transformative Justice Coalition, the Rainbow Push operation, and others, Hip Hop Caucus, and this bus tour, this votercade, trying to get the vote out, trying to get 10 million more Black voters, which is the hashtag 10 billion more Black voters. But strategy-wise, what needs to happen right now, Karen?
Yeah, you know, I think we need to do several things. Number one, I want to say, I think there's, been a lot of effort to do early and ongoing outreach with the African-American community. I've seen this with specific campaigns. I've seen this with, the party committees. I know they've actually done advertising with Black newspapers and Black radio in some of these key races. But I think, we've also got to make sure we are reminding our voters of the power of our vote. And I like to remind folks, there is no Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson if we didn't show up in record numbers in 2020 and then hold President Biden accountable to his promise to nominate and confirm the first Black woman to the Supreme Court. There is no Inflation Reduction Act, which reduced the cost of prescription drugs like insulin to $35, which is going to lower energy costs. There is no additional resources for the child tax credit, which actually lifted 756,000 Black children out of poverty. So I think we have to start by saying, remember the power of our vote to actually bring change. And we did make change. And then we have to say, but there's more work to do. We need to do more to address systemic racism, criminal justice reform, continuing to create jobs and tackling inflation, where you've seen the president and Democrats, again, with the Inflation Reduction Act and other measures to try to bring costs down. And we need to remind folks the cost if we don't show up, because the truth is, when we do show up, we change the course of the nation. We make progress. And if we don't show up, we know the costs in this election are extremely high in terms of what the agenda on the Republican side, frankly, is. And I'll just start with a national ban on reproductive freedom, which is a huge issue in our community for men and women. The idea that politicians should tell us how to take best care of our health and well-being. And now they're trying to control whether or not women can travel out of states and track our movements. We're already over surveilled as a people.
So, and before we throw it to Dr. Chavis, you mentioned so many of the good things, the wins, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, Ketanji Brown Jackson. You got the first Black woman vice president. You have the American Rescue Plan, the various wins by this administration, which really has flown under the radar when it comes to mainstream media. Even having said that, though, Karen, people seem to be wired to only look at what hasn't happened. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the Voting Rights Act. How significant is that? And how can you, as a strategist, how can the party get people to focus on the wins instead of what they haven't been able to control?
I think we have to do both. I think we can be honest and say, here's what we've accomplished. And again, I want people to remember, we made that happen. That is the power of our vote, right? But to acknowledge there is more work to be done. And that's why we have to turn out. Because remember, I think we also have to remind people, voting is a lifetime, it's a lifestyle. It's not a one-time thing and then everything is fixed. We have to keep at it because that's how we make change. And we know, let's be honest, we need 2 more votes in the Senate. We need to hold on to the Senate and 2 more votes to pass the Voting Rights Act and to pass the John Lewis bill. And we need to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And so I think, again, we have to say, here's what was accomplished and acknowledge there is more work that has to get done, but it only happens if we show up.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis?
Absolutely. That's a great segue. In many state legislatures where a lot of the backward trends are happening, we have to now vote. I think it's interesting that sometimes our brothers and sisters in the community, they get frustrated when they don't see enough change. But the truth of the matter is we've made enormous progress. But, and that's where the Black press comes in. So what we do, Karen, we not only point to those wins, but we always remind people of, as you began to show, the power of the Black vote, but also the responsibility of the Black vote. Voting for us is sacred. So many people died. So many people bled, went to jail to get the right to vote. And it's something we should never take for granted. Something that Frederick Douglass said a long time ago. Freedom is a constant struggle. Voting is a constant struggle. And after January the 6th, we all know now that democracy itself is on the ballot. Reproductive rights for women is on the ballot. Racial justice, environmental justice, climate justice is on the ballot. We have more than reasons to vote. And so, Stacey, that's why this interview is so important. I hope a lot of people, millions of people, will watch it. When we came up with the hashtag 10 million more Black voters, a lot of people said, "Oh my man, why don't you lower that number? That's too many." No, we have to go out, make sure that every woman, every child, every voting age, every man in our communities, as well as our allies, our Latino brothers and sisters, our Native American, our Asian American, and our white progressives. We all have to work together. This is something, and interestingly, in Florida and Texas and Georgia and the Carolinas and Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania and all these key states, we have the margin. We can make sure that we turn not only the national politics around, but we turn the state politics. And I think that a lot of times we think that it's just the top of the ballot, but it's the whole ballot. We have a lot of work to do, and this is our opportunity. November the 8th can be a not only a continuing day for freedom, justice, and equality, but it's a day that we can try to overcome some of this backwardness that the extreme right is trying to take our country. And I think Kansas is a great example of how women in Kansas decided to rise up. And Kansas is a red state. So to me, as to me, I would not cede any state to the far right wing. This is a national broadcast. I want everybody to listen in every precinct, in every congressional district, in every state. We must vote. This is one of the most important elections in our lifetime.
And so with
It,
that,
it,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen. You wanted to
I
respond?
was, yeah, I was just going to say, you've mentioned Kansas, and something I want your viewers and listeners to know. In Kansas, it was half of the people, I mean, Democrats and women came out, men and women. Half of the people, though, who voted to defeat that horrible ballot initiative were either what we would call unaffiliated voters or Republicans. So to your point, Dr. Chavis, we should not give up on any part of this country, because we can win. And there are people, even those not in our party, who understand the danger of electing some of these election deniers, frankly, who are running for attorneys general, secretaries of state, governors' races. I mean, to your point, and we have to be voting at every single level. City council, mayor. We have a hugely important mayor's race in Los Angeles, where we could actually have the first African-American woman be as the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, one of the largest cities in the country. And so I completely agree. We've got a Black woman, Deborah DeGier, running for governor in Iowa. She's a fantastic candidate, and that's a red state. We should never say it's not possible. We got to continue to do the work and get folks elected. And we've got wonderful people on the ballot, again, in those down ballot races as well, that we've got to pay attention to. You're so right.
Yeah, we're talking with Karen Finney, a leading Democratic strategist. If anyone knows anything about strategy around elections, it is Karen Finney. It's great to have her here with the Black Press. Karen, back in 2008, President Obama ran for president the first time, and the young ones really turned out for Barack Obama. How today in 2022, where social media has really dominated everything, how do you get the young ones off of social media for a moment? How do you get them engaged in this today, the way Barack Obama got them engaged in 2008?
What President Obama did in 2008 was his campaign understood where young people are and said, okay, we've got to be there. And so, that is really a critical part of the strategy. We've got to be everywhere. We've got to be on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. I mean, a lot of our folks, actually, I just was looking at a poll, are on YouTube and Facebook, as well as Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. So we've got to be where they are and communicate with them around the issues they really care about. I will say we are seeing really positive increases in voter registration among younger voters who are starting to understand, especially after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, and which was, contained the largest climate resources putting forward climate change that we've ever had in this country. That was mobilizing to young voters. Reproductive freedom, especially for younger voters who, have never, for all of us, having a right taken away is just so offensive. And so I think part of it is we've got to talk to younger voters about the issues they care about, criminal justice reform being another one. And we've also got to talk to them in those channels where they are. We're probably not going to get them off the phones, but if we could get them to, use the phone to connect with the information. And I think that's part of why this bus trip and, the hip hop caucus, what y'all are doing is so important, because it's trying to bring young people into the conversation in ways that hopefully resonate with them.
Yeah, and getting them engaged also means talking their language, right?
That's right. That's right. Now, I'm not sure that I can do it so well anymore, but certainly having those conversations, and it's just like we said with the other voters, making sure they also understand, if they haven't already looked at it, what's at stake for them in this election. Because really, as Dr. Chavis talked about, we're talking about literally our democracy is on the ballot. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you think about some of, again, these election deniers who are looking to try to be in control of truly the levers of our democracy, with those secretaries of state races, attorneys general races, where they really would control voting at all levels and all parts of democracy. Look at what Brian Kemp has done in Georgia as an example, where they're literally trying to kick people off of local boards of elections, specifically African Americans, right? And they're trying to say that it's legal. So reminding them that this democracy only thrives, only continues in the way we know and love it, and improves if they are engaged. And yeah, we got to talk their language. We need to get some of the, it's why we got to have more young people teaching us how to talk their language.
To use a sports term, when a favorite team or favorite is your favorite to win, it's in the bag, so to speak. It's yours to lose. Well,
yes,
something happened back in June. Up until that moment, when the Supreme Court issued that Roe v. Wade decision, the House and the Senate was the Republicans to lose by all accounts, right? So now here we are, just on the cuffs of the midterm elections, just a few weeks away. How do the Democrats continue to capitalize on that? I heard you already speak this morning about the reproductive rights and not allowing women to travel across states. How do you keep that momentum going to make a difference come November 8th?
I think the other thing we have to do a couple of things. We have to do things like this bus tour that we're talking about, where we really take it on the road. I know there's a wonderful organization, Higher Heights, which specifically focuses on electing Black women. They're doing something called the Girls Road Trip, where they're going to go to different states and invite Black women to come in and for a weekend help some of our candidates. So we've got to also, for each of us in our own communities and our own networks, use our voices and leverage our own power to, get 10 friends, family members, make sure the people that are in your life are voting and understand the stakes. That's another thing. Because I always want to keep it to what each one of us can do, right? Not just, big strategy. I think the other part of that is also, let's make sure people know where some of these other candidates truly stand. Because one of the things we've seen, and the party committees like the DSCC and the DCCC have done a very good job of tracking this, where candidates have tried to scrub their websites and shift their talking points, so they're not really talking about some of their more extreme positions. And I think we've got to call them out. I mean, how can look at what they're doing when they're trying to use the crime against Democrats and say we're weak on crime. How can you support what happened on January 6th and say you are tougher on crime, and that than those of us who recognize that was a siege, that was an attempted coup, where police officers and Capitol Hill officers were trying to do their job.
They nearly pulled it off too, when you think about it, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's how fragile our democracy is. And, when you mentioned the Dobbs decision, I think part of what was so powerful about that, even if reproductive freedom isn't an issue that you folks have been paying attention to, it showed what can happen, right? That we can actually have rights taken away. And that is part of why we have to now codify reproductive freedom in federal law through the Congress. And we need those extra votes in the Senate to do it, because whereas at one time for our folks, we went to the courts to try to right historic wrongs, we now have a very extreme Supreme Court. We've got 2 more voting rights cases coming up. Who knows what's going to happen on those? And again, we need to ensure that we are passing federal legislation to protect voting rights. So again, calling some of those other candidates out, making them be on the record and public about where they stand, so that folks really know what the choice is.
Yeah, and before we go back to Dr. Chavez, let me pose this. As we know, Black women really were the reason why the Democrats were able to grab the White House, control of the Senate, and really the House as well. They come out. They've always supported and the strongest support bases, and continues to be Black women. But is Democrats somehow in danger of alienating that group, because many might feel that, okay, we are doing this, but we are here alone. I mean, how do you keep engaging them, even though you know that the vast majority will vote Democrats? But how do you keep engaging them and not risk losing them?
Well, I think that's why for all of our voters, we have to, and I do think that, the party committees, I mean, the DSCC,
Yes.
one of their chief deputies is an African American woman. They have spokespeople who are African American, who are in the room helping when those decisions are being made about where to spend money on advertising, to make sure that we are buying ads in Black newspapers and on Black radio, to make sure that our messaging is resonating with our community, because we have a different set of issue priorities than other communities. So part of it is we can't take anybody for granted. We have to treat Black women and Black men, frankly, and our youth as what we would call swing voters, or as we would call persuasion voters. And we've got to both remind folks and do the work of saying, here's how, why your vote is so important and why we want you to vote for us. And so I think that's part of it. Now, I will say for myself and my community, my sisterhood community, we are, mobilizing. We're going to be doing, conference calls with our friends in different states to try to, help keep each other motivated and mobilized, and making sure that we're doing our part to help spread the message and help people who maybe are some of our friends who may not know some of these accomplishments and the things that Democrats have actually done. Because as I said, I think we have to, folks are busy. They're living their lives every day. They don't, they don't know. So we've got to make sure they know, and then make sure they understand what's at stake if we don't show up. And I just want to say, I want to make clear, Black women and Black men, we do tend to vote, for the Democrats, but that's because we see the Democratic Party as best representatives of the issues we care about. I mean, we're, sometimes I think it gets portrayed as if we just blindly follow the Democrats. No, Black voters, we are very discerning. We are very judicious with our vote, right? We want to make sure that we vote for somebody who can get it done. And I think that's important. And I do want to say, I think it's important we include Black men in this conversation, because, we need our men to help protect the very same things we're talking about, to keep our communities safe, to, help protect women's rights, to make sure we keep making progress on the economic front and keep, continuing to create jobs. Frankly, I'd like to see us continue to lower the cost of healthcare. $35, for insulin for seniors. Boy, that's a life changer for a lot of folks. But we need to do more, and so we need our men and women and our young people to show up.
And Karen, being that the president somehow he has very low approval rating numbers, does that really matter in the voters? And B, whether it matters or not, how do you strategize around that when you are approaching election day?
Yeah. So a couple of things, it matters in some places and some areas not, because, the strength of our candidates is, a Sherry Beasley in North Carolina, Val Demings in Florida, Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. I mean, we've got really strong candidates running for Senate across this country. And so that ultimately is what people, at the end of the day, people are going to vote for the person they think is going to do the best job. Now, sure, it's, there's an overall sort of, how do we feel about the Democratic Party? How do we feel about whether or not they've, delivered? And again, that's part of why, elections and campaigns are an important time, when we can help, when people are able to pay attention, when we can communicate and talk about the things that we've done a little more intensely. I mean, I keep going back to this the child tax credit. I mean,
Yes.
756,000 Black children out of poverty. I mean, that's phenomenal. And
Republicans
that's what we want.
they stopped that, right?
That's right. That's right. We could have done more, and they stopped it. And so that's what I mean by that's what's at stake. We can do more to help our children if we turn out to vote. Now, I will say that thankfully, because we've got some legislative wins, the president and the vice president's approval ratings are improving,
Yes.
especially in our community. And again, that's good for everybody. But again, I think it's the strength of the candidates themselves, and we're so fortunate we have some wonderful candidates. And I will tell you, I mean, some of the candidates on the other side, I would not want to have to explain some of what is going on over
Well,
there.
and Karen, real quick, big announcement. The president said he's pardoning all
Yes.
federal marijuana possession, simple possession charges. He's urging states to do the same on the state level.
Yes.
That ropes in, I mean, you're talking about a large swath of African-American, particularly African-American males who are now going to get relief. And it comes again a few weeks before the midterms. I don't know if he timed it that way or not, but is that going to make a difference?
Absolutely. I hope it does. I mean, because, and here's why. There's two parts to this. Number one, as you said, what that's going to mean for predominantly African-American men who are currently serving federal prison sentences who will get real relief in the form of a pardon. But also, I go back to the beginning part of my message. That is a promise kept by Joe Biden. Joe Biden made that promise during the election. And again, because we as Black folks turned out in record numbers in 2020 and changed the course of this country and elected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and then held him accountable, because there's been a lot of really good work by activists on the outside making sure that promise is kept. That's why this is happening. And again, that's why I think it's important we remind folks that's why our power matters. That's why our vote matters. That's how we are part of making that change happen.
Yeah. Dr. Chavis, you want to close us out?
Well, thank you. Just a word of good news. I want to thank Karen Finney for her continued leadership, advance the inclusion, the diversity of our democracy from the federal level to the state level. Our buses are rolling starting tomorrow in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, and Michigan, and Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, into Florida. And just a point, in the last 48 hours, we're getting calls from all the other states. Please bring the buses to our state. I mean, there's enthusiasm building around not only the bus tour, but the getting out to vote. This coming Sunday, a lot of souls to the polls. They're having early voting. So we're going to be, we're not going to leave anything assumed. We're going to be mobilizing, grassroots organizing, getting out to vote, rallying people, and a lot of young people. Stacey, you mentioned what was millennials and Generation Z. They're flocking to the buses, and they're votercade is when you not only have a few, but we've had votercade for over 100 cars. People decorate their cars, blow their horns, getting out to vote. It's excitement, and a lot of it is driven by hip hop culture. I want to thank the hip hop caucus and all the hip hop artists that are joining in to add their voices and their spheres of influence. So there's good news. There's a rising enthusiasm intergenerationally in Black America today and tomorrow and through November the 8th of the importance of getting out to vote.
Yeah, Barbara Arnwine of the Transformative Justice Coalition called the votercade a celebration. So they are celebrating, Karen. And I know that there's a long road ahead, but the Democrats are hoping to be celebrating after November 8th as well. We really, really appreciate you stopping by the Black Press of America, leading Democratic strategist Karen Finney, and good to see that you're doing well.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be with you this morning. Thank
Everybody,
you. And I'll
thank
be
you
looking for the bus, Dr. Chavis.
Thank you so much for joining. Let it be known.
Take care.
Take care.